Picture this. While most Americans were focused on their daily routines, a single piece of legislation quietly passed through Congress that could fundamentally alter who controls the future of American transportation. We're talking about a $912 billion market that's nearly $1 trillion, and a policy decision that might have just handed China the keys to America's electric vehicle future. The clock is ticking, and as of September 30th, 2025, everything changes. But here's what the headlines aren't telling you about what this really means for American workers, American innovation, and America's position in the global economy. To understand the magnitude of what's happening, we need to start with some numbers that should make every American pay attention. The global electric vehicle market is projected to hit $912 billion by 2026, growing to an astounding $2.5 trillion by 2034. That's not just big money. That's economy-defining money. And until recently, the United States was positioning itself to capture a significant slice of this massive pie. American companies had pledged $312 billion in EV and battery manufacturing investments, creating an estimated 243,000 jobs across 557 facilities nationwide. These weren't just any jobs. These were high-tech manufacturing positions, the kind that could rebuild America's industrial base for the 21st century. States like Georgia attracted over $23 billion in EV investments, while Michigan secured $25 billion from automotive giants. The Southeast alone was expecting 74,000 new jobs from a $77 billion investment surge. But then came the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBA as it's known in Washington. Passed in July 2025 under the Trump administration, this legislation fundamentally rewrote America's approach to electric vehicles. The most dramatic change? The complete elimination of the $7,500 federal tax credit for new EVs and the $4,000 credit for used vehicles, effective September 30th, 2025. That's exactly 20 days from today. Now, you might think, so what? Government subsidies end all the time. But here's where it gets interesting. About 50% of EVs sold in the United States this year have been eligible for that federal tax credit. We're not talking about a small market adjustment. We're talking about a fundamental shift in consumer purchasing power that could reshape an entire industry overnight. The timing of this policy reversal is particularly striking when you consider what's happening on the other side of the Pacific. While America eliminates its EV incentives, China is doubling down on electric vehicle dominance. Chinese automakers now account for more than half of all electric vehicles produced worldwide, with their domestic market experiencing 32% growth in just the first half of 2025. Companies like BYD aren't just competing with Tesla, they're surpassing it in key markets. Here's a number that should concern every American strategist. The average Chinese EV sells for $34,400, while the average American EV costs $55,242. That's a $20,842 price difference that reflects fundamental competitive advantages including lower labor costs, government subsidies, and vertical integration that American manufacturers are struggling to match. The data shows that Chinese EVs can travel 500 miles on a single charge and recharge to 80% in under 20 minutes. Performance metrics that American manufacturers like General Motors and Ford are still working to achieve. BYD alone sold 2.1 million new energy vehicles in the first half of 2025, compared to Tesla's 720,803 battery electric vehicles during the same period. For the United States, this means we're not just losing market share, we're potentially losing technological leadership in one of the most important industries of the future. The Alliance for American Manufacturing has warned that this could create what they're calling an extinction-level event for American automotive competitiveness. But the implications go far beyond just cars. The Harvard Salata Institute estimates that eliminating EV tax credits will save the government $169 billion over the next decade. That sounds good for taxpayers, right? However, their research also shows that this policy change will reduce America's EV market share from a projected 48% to 42% by 2030. That 6 percentage point difference represents millions of vehicles annually and billions in lost economic activity. Atlas Public Policy warns that approximately 80,000 American manufacturing jobs are now at risk. These aren't just statistics. These are real communities, real families, and real regional economies that have been counting on the EV transition to provide stable, well-paying employment for decades to come. The federal government has already committed over $23 billion in loans and grants to support EV and battery manufacturing through programs like the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Loan Program. Notable commitments include a conditional $9.2 billion loan to Blue Oval SK for 3 battery plants in Tennessee and Kentucky. These investments assumed a growing domestic market for electric vehicles. Without that market demand, the economic viability of these projects becomes questionable. What makes this situation particularly concerning is the global context. European markets continue to grow at 26% annually, supported by maintained government incentives and regulatory pressure from tailpipe emissions targets. Meanwhile, North America's EV growth has slowed to just 3% in the first half of 2025. Significantly trailing the global average of 28%. The policy reversal comes just as global competitors are accelerating their strategies. China became the world's largest auto exporter in 2023, and Chinese manufacturers are increasingly focusing on EV exports to markets worldwide. The competitive dynamics are further complicated by trade policy responses, with the Biden administration implementing 100% tariffs on Chinese-made EVs and the European Union imposing tariffs of up to 35.3%. But tariffs alone may not be sufficient if domestic market incentives are simultaneously eliminated. Research indicates that over half of consumers in the United States, Germany, UK, and France are aware of at least one Chinese EV brand, and they would consider a Chinese EV if priced 20% lower than similar non-Chinese models. Industry analysts are already predicting significant market volatility. Cox Automotive forecasts record EV sales in the third quarter of 2025 as consumers rush to claim the tax credit before it expires, followed by what they describe as a collapse in Q4, as the electric vehicle market adjusts to its new reality. Ford CEO Jim Farley has described the policy shift as a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for the company's gasoline and hybrid vehicle business, while General Motors CEO Mary Barra acknowledged that the $7,500 tax credit has been driving demand and warned that eliminating it will slow sales. The infrastructure implications are equally significant. The federal government committed $7.5 billion through the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program to build fast charging stations in key highway corridors. Research indicates that terminating this program would cut EV market share by an additional 3.2 percentage points by 2030, making it the second most impactful policy change after eliminating purchase tax credits. Currently, there are 509 corridor-ready charging stations operational with 1,104 recommended stations identified for future development. This infrastructure build-out is critical for addressing consumer concerns about range anxiety and enabling long-distance EV travel. The policy uncertainty could slow private sector investment in charging infrastructure by reducing confidence in long-term EV adoption rates. So here we are, 20 days away from what could be the most significant shift in American transportation and energy policy in decades. The $9-12 billion global EV market represents more than just an economic opportunity. It's a test of America's ability to compete in the industries that will define the global economy for the next 50 years. The immediate question isn't whether electric vehicles will continue to grow globally. They will. Chinese manufacturers will continue expanding, European markets will keep advancing, and emerging economies will increasingly adopt electric transportation. The real question is whether America will be leading this transformation or watching it from the sidelines. We're looking at a scenario where the United States could save $169 billion in government spending over the next decade, while potentially losing hundreds of billions in economic activity, technological leadership, and strategic positioning against China's rapidly expanding influence in clean energy technology. The decisions being made right now will determine whether American workers benefit from the EV revolution or become casualties of it, whether American companies lead in next-generation transportation technology or struggle to catch up with competitors who maintained their strategic focus while we changed course. So what do you think? Is eliminating EV incentives a necessary correction to government overreach? Or are we witnessing America voluntarily stepping back from one of the most important competitive battles of the 21st century? The countdown to September 30th continues, and the implications of what happens next will ripple through the American economy for decades to come.